October is upon us, and what better way to celebrate the spooky season than by diving deep into the DC comic event Blackest Night. This event currently represents the absolute height of Green Lantern's popularity, as several years of storylines weaving in and out of both the Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps ongoing series grew into something truly epic that engulfed the entire DC universe. This is the first of 7 videos I'll be posting over the month of October covering the Blackest Night event, with the final one coming out on Halloween. I should say up front that this event had a ton of tie-ins and I won't be covering all of them. A lot of Blackest Night tie-ins only really make sense in the context of the ongoing series they're attached to, and looking at them outside of that context doesn't leave us with much that's relevant in a discussion of the main Blackest Night storyline, so I'm going to be sticking to tie-ins that either directly impact the main storyline or enhance it by broadening its scope or filling in some important gaps. Also, it's worth mentioning up front that I won't be following any existing recommended reading order as I cover this event. I came up with my own, and it makes sense for this specific project, since a lot of these comics take place at the exact same time, and I want to group them in a way that'll lead to better standalone videos, while also preserving the flow of the overall story. It's not perfect, but it was never perfect, so hopefully you can just trust me and go along with it. This time we're going to be covering Green Lantern number 43, Blackest Night number 0, Blackest Night number 1, Green Lantern 44, Blackest Night 2, and Blackest Night number 3. Future videos won't be jumping around between series quite so much, but it's necessary at the beginning as everything gets started. So let's set the stage. An ancient prophecy is buried deep within the pages of the Book of Oa, the prophecy of the Blackest Night. It tells of the rise of the emotional spectrum, the power generated by every living thing, our emotions converted into energy as quickly as we can feel them. According to the prophecy, the Green Lantern Corps powered by willpower will soon be joined by 6 other corps embodying the power of rage, greed, fear, hope, compassion, and love. And as their light shines brighter and brighter, a truth will come into focus. All light inevitably casts a shadow, and this darkness would grow until it's able to swallow up every light and every life in the universe. The Guardians of the Universe don't take the prophecy very seriously. They've grown old and complacent and believe themselves to be the ultimate authority in the universe. They can't even imagine something like the Blackest Night prophecy coming true on their watch. They would never allow it to happen, therefore it can't happen. But unbeknownst to the Guardians, one of their own has spent months working behind the scenes to ensure that it does happen. She worships the coming darkness, hears its whispers, and does its bidding. Ever since a near-death experience at the hands of the Anti-Monitor, the Guardian now known as Scar has been quietly fanning the flames of war between the various Lantern Corps, ensuring that the emotional spectrum would shine as brightly as possible to herald the coming of the darkness. All that remains now is to build an army that will trample the light, which means it's time for the birth of the first Black Lantern. Green Lantern number 43 is written by Jeff Johns with pencils by Doug Monkey, inks by Christian Alme, colors by Randy Mayer, and letters by Rob Lay. This issue introduces us to William Hand, the villain known as Black Hand. He's been a rival of Green Lantern Hal Jordan since the early Silver Age, but has never really been much of a threat. Nobody ever took Black Hand seriously, including his own family. He was the weird one, the one who creeped everyone else out. He had an unnatural attraction to dead things, which was only enhanced thanks to the family business. His father ran a mortuary just outside of Coast City, and young William grew up surrounded by death. He saw death as something peaceful, and thought that the living should aspire to wrap themselves in the embrace of eternal darkness. That's why he was so terrified to see a Green Lantern for the first time. All of that light was a blindingly bright rejection of everything William had come to value, and he couldn't be at peace knowing that light was still out there, shining so brightly. So he dedicated himself to snuffing it out. He made a costume for himself out of a few body bags from the family mortuary, and then spent years battling Green Lantern as Black Hand. He'd lose every time, but he'd always sleep better knowing that there was a little less light in the world. Now, the darkness called to him. The same voice that spoke to Scar now directed William Hand, telling him that the time had come for the Void to reclaim the living. As a sacrifice to his new master and a fulfillment of his own nature, Black Hand took the lives of his entire family, including his own. Scar arrived and summoned the first Black Lantern ring, which lands on Black Hand's finger, reanimating him, transforming him into something new. Just as the Green Lanterns have Ion and the Sinestro Corps have Parallax, the Black Lanterns now have Black Hand, the embodiment of the power of the Black Lanterns. And just like that, a villain that nobody ever took seriously became the greatest threat to life the universe has ever known. That brings us to Blackest Night number 0, written by Geoff Johns with pencils by Evan Hayes, inks by Eau Claire Albert and Rob Hunter, colors by Alex Sinclair, and letters by Nick J. Napolitano. Late one night, Hal Jordan and Barry Allen meet up in a Gotham City cemetery at the grave of Bruce Wayne. Death is never an easy thing to deal with, especially when it's someone so close to you. But being a superhero in the DC universe complicates those feelings even more. Time and again, Hal and Barry have seen their fellow heroes die and be mourned, only to return to life a little while later. Hell, the two of them have both come back to life once each, and neither of them is quite sure how to process the loss of their friend. Should they treat it with the gravity and finality that it would normally deserve? Or should they expect Batman to return before they'd even made their peace with his loss? Barry is trying to stay hopeful, but he feels the pain of the years he missed before his own resurrection. The look on Barry's face tells you everything you need to know about how hard it can be to catch up with a world that left you behind. Hal, meanwhile, has to deal with being remembered as a villain. Even though he dedicated his own death and afterlife to seeking redemption, the superhero community and the Green Lantern Corps aren't just going to forget everything that happened when he was Parallax. And even though Batman was one of the loudest voices speaking out against Hal, nothing will ever take away the one moment all those years ago when they finally came to understand each other. Two young children both saw their parents die in front of them, and both used that experience as fuel to forge themselves into heroes, one in the light and the other the dark. As Hal and Barry leave the cemetery, Black Hand emerges from the shadows and approaches Bruce Wayne's grave. With his bare hands, he digs up Bruce's skull, and we get our first utterance of the Black Lantern Oath. The blackest night falls from the skies, the darkness grows as all light dies. We crave your hearts and your demise, by my black hand the dead shall rise. As William Hand speaks those words, a dark mist emanates from his Black Lantern ring and engulfs the skull of Bruce Wayne, as the Guardian Scar looks on from the shadows with a smile. Blackest Night number 1, written by Geoff Johns with pencils by Evan Hayes, inks by Eau Claire Albert, colors by Alex Sinclair, and letters by Nick J. Napolitano. The issue opens with the heroes and citizens of the DC Universe honoring the dead. The day that Superman was killed by Doomsday had become a national day of mourning, and when Superman eventually returned, it became a day to honor fallen heroes of all kinds. Green Lantern's Hal Jordan, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, and Kyle Rayner are all participating in a celebration of Hal's hometown of Coast City. 7 million people died when the alien warlord Mongol blew up Coast City all those years ago, and only now have they finally been able to fully rebuild. They honor the dead by bringing new life to their home. The Day of Remembrance stretches far beyond just Coast City, as people everywhere gather to pay respects, and it gives us some insight on what happens when a superhero dies. Any hero whose identity is public when they die gets buried in the Valhalla Cemetery, where an advanced security system prevents anyone from tampering with their graves. If a hero's identity is still a secret, their remains are sent home to their families. Villains, however, are entombed in a morgue in the basement of the Hall of Justice, to prevent other villains from digging up graves and harvesting useful parts. All except for the Flash's rogues. They're a tight-knit family, and they have their own private cemetery that not even the Flash knows about. Speaking of the Flash, Barry and Hal meet up at the Hall of Justice that evening, and end the day of mourning by continuing the conversation they started at Bruce Wayne's grave. Both of them were lucky enough to come back from the dead, but Barry hasn't been back for very long, and he wants to know everything that he missed. He wants to know how many of his friends died while he was gone. And with a heavy heart, Hal shows him. So many friends, so many more than Barry could have expected, all gone. Batman, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Firestorm, Ralph and Sue Dibney, members of the JSA, the Freedom Fighters, and a whole host of heroes Barry had never even met, because they started their careers after he died, and then died themselves before he came back. It's a lot to take in, and for the first time in a very long time, Barry Allen sits still, as if held down by the weight of this terrible knowledge. A very cool detail in both this issue and Blackest Night #0 is that the Flash is always shown moving at high speed, splitting his attention in multiple directions at once, even when he's just standing there having a conversation, as if he's trying to compensate for everything he missed by taking in as much information as possible all at once. And it's a great visual trick, because not only does it tell you something important about the internal life of this character, it makes something as simple as him sitting still in a chair an incredibly impactful moment. Unfortunately, this would be the only moment of rest Barry would get for the remainder of the night, as Alfred Pennyworth's voice comes crackling over the Justice League communicator, desperately begging for help. Alfred had gone to bring flowers to Bruce's grave, only to find the site in ruins after Black Hand took the skull and left. On the planet Oa, the Guardians of the Universe have finally seen the writing on the wall. The War of Light is in full swing, with the different cores of the emotional spectrum clashing across nearly every sector. The Guardians can no longer deny the legitimacy of the prophecy, but it's already too late to prevent the coming of the Blackest Night. So instead, the Guardians intend to rally the full force of the Green Lantern Corps and confront the coming darkness head-on. But they're too late. Because the Blackest Night isn't coming, it's already here. Deep in Space Sector 666, a black central battery erupts with a swarm of Black Lantern rings buzzing like flies as they wash over the universe. At that moment, in the Guardian Citadel, Scar makes her move, ruthlessly killing one of the Guardians while using the power of darkness to fend off attacks from the others. The Guardians purged themselves of emotion long ago, so their hearts are empty and useless. But the same can't be said for someone like Carter Hall, Hawkman. Carter is furious. He just received a call from his best friend, Ray Palmer, the Atom. Ray's wife, Jean Loring, is dead, and Ray wanted Carter to go with him when he visits her grave. The problem is that before she died, Jean Loring murdered one of their closest friends, Sue Dibney, which sent her husband, Ralph Dibney, the elongated man, into a downward spiral that ultimately resulted in his own death. So the idea of going to visit Jean's grave on a day of mourning really pisses Carter off. To make matters worse, he has an incredibly strained relationship with Kendra Saunders, Hawkgirl. Both Hawkman and Hawkgirl are connected through this magical curse. They're destined to fall in love only to then be murdered and then reincarnated, where the cycle repeats itself over and over again through countless lifetimes across hundreds of centuries. But this time is different, because unlike Carter, Kendra has no memory of their past lives together, and she refuses to allow herself to get too close to him if it means they'll both die. Hawkman is willing to embrace their tragic destiny if it means they get to be together, and Hawkgirl is willing to sacrifice their time together if it means preventing a cruel fate from controlling their lives, even though she does still love him just as much as he loves her. On his best day, Carter is a volcano of emotion waiting to erupt, but today, with everything that's happened, he only needs one more push to become overwhelmed with love and rage. That's when Ralph and Sue Dibney arrive, their twisted and decaying bodies reanimated by Black Lantern rings. They use the element of surprise to mercilessly beat Hawkman and Hawkgirl with their own weapons. And as Elongated Man pummels Hawkman, he tells Carter over and over that Kendra never loved him, that she hated him. And then, with Carter's emotions at their peak, Elongated Man harvests his heart. The emotional energy from Hawkman's heart is quickly drained into Ralph's ring, as the Black Lantern ring's power level rises from 0% to 0.01%. And then Sue takes Kendra's heart, and 0.01% becomes 0.02%. Once they've finished, Black Hand arrives, and releases 2 new rings that compel the dead bodies of Hawkman and Hawkgirl to rise as Black Lanterns. This scene is so incredibly important, because not only does it get us invested in the emotional stakes of this group of characters very quickly, It also tells us everything we need to know about the threat of the Black Lanterns. They're collecting energy for something, and they gather that energy by harvesting the emotions from the hearts of their victims. And in order to get the most out of every heart, they attack you with the body and words of your dearly departed friends, to rile you up and make sure you're as angry or sad or afraid as possible. And then, once you've been harvested, your body will be reanimated by a black ring, and the process will continue. This issue goes a long way to remind us that while we may think of Blackest Night as primarily a Green Lantern story, it's actually a DC Universe story that grew out of Green Lantern. The real strength of Blackest Night is that it makes every hero in the DC Universe confront a threat that's designed to make us emotionally invested in characters that we may never have cared about before. I've personally never been a big fan of Hawkman, but in just a few pages, this issue sold me on the core struggles that defined his existence, which made his death at the hands of the Black Lanterns that much more impactful, while also making me interested in seeing more of Hawkman later on. And that kind of experience is going to matter in a big way very soon, because while the Lanterns do play an incredibly important role in this event, there's also a small handful of non-Lantern characters who become vital to the story. But for now, let's continue on to Green Lantern number 44, written by Jeff Johns with pencils by Doug Mahnke, inks by Christian Alme, Doug Mahnke, Tom Wynn, and Rodney Ramos, colors by Randy Mayer, and letters by Rob Lay. After hearing from Alfred, Barry and Hal go back to Gotham City to investigate Bruce Wayne's desecrated grave. The grave was unmarked, and Bruce's death hadn't been announced to the public yet, so their first instinct is to build a list of everyone who knew both Batman's secret identity and the fact that he was dead. Which would normally be a solid place to start, except their investigation got cut short by the arrival of another dead friend, J'onn J'onzz, the Martian Manhunter, resurrected as a Black Lantern. The Martian Manhunter has always been a fairly passive, peaceful person, and because of that, most people take for granted just how powerful he really is. Hal and Barry are finding that out the hard way. Not only does J'onn have strength and speed on par with Superman, he can also turn invisible and intangible and shapeshift and manipulate your mind to make you see whatever illusion he chooses. The two heroes are struggling to handle the murderous Martian by themselves, and all of their calls for backup go unanswered, as the Black Rings continue to spread across the Earth and the greater universe, with a hailstorm of Black Lantern rings raining down on the homeworlds of every Lantern Corps. On Oa, Scar has subdued the rest of the Guardians, and reveals that, as she sees it, the path of darkness is the ultimate endpoint that the Guardians had been working towards the entire time. The Guardians dedicated themselves to eliminating chaos in the universe, and even went so far as to identify the emotional spectrum as a supreme source of chaos, which is why Scar believes the only way to truly eliminate chaos from the universe is to eliminate emotion, and the only way to do that is to eliminate all life. Elsewhere, John Stewart has made his annual pilgrimage to the former site of the planet Xanshi, a world that was destroyed because of a mistake John made out of pure arrogance. John's entire life has been dedicated to somehow atoning for what happened, to the point that even Fatality, a survivor of Xanshi, thinks he should just try to move on instead. But just as John struggles to find a way to put the past behind him, a swarm of black rings impact the debris field, and to John's confusion and horror, Xanshi rises again. Before we move on to the next issue, there are two major things that get set up here. The first is the fact that the Black Lanterns can see the emotional state of their victims, which is represented by a first-person view of characters lit up with whatever emotion they're feeling at the moment. This is to help a Black Lantern know when someone is feeling an emotion strongly enough to warrant harvesting their heart. Someone like Barry fluctuates, feeling hopeful one moment and afraid the next, which means the Black Lantern will have to work on him some more until one really intense emotion emerges. Hal, on the other hand, already feels unwavering, intense willpower, which is why J'onn attempted to take his heart during the fight. The other big thing that warrants pointing out is the fact that this issue highlights a connection between the oncoming darkness and resurrected characters. Whenever Barry and Hal come into direct contact with a Black Lantern, or even just the residue left behind on Bruce Wayne's grave, they have a sudden, violent reaction to it, as a streak of decay momentarily appears across their faces. The first thing Jean says to them is that they should both be dead. And in Blackest Night number 0, Flash talked about superhero resurrection as them simply walking through a door that a greater force had pried open for them. And while he likely wasn't being literal, it is worth thinking about just how many superheroes in the DC universe have died and come back to life, and what that could mean when facing an enemy with the power to reanimate the dead. Blackest Night number 2 and 3, written by Jeff Johns with pencils by Avon Hayes, inks by Eau Claire Albert, Joe Prado, and Julio Ferreira, colors by Alex Sinclair, and letters by Nick J. Napolitano. Black rings continue to raise the dead across the DC universe, faster than anyone can realize what's even happening. Boston Brand, the ghostly hero known as Deadman, desperately clings to his own tombstone, not wanting to be forced out of the grave. But despite his wishes, a black ring reanimates his body, and Black Lantern Deadman rises into the night sky. This finally attracts the attention of several heroes of the magical community: Zatanna, Blue Devil, the Spectre, and the Phantom Stranger. They investigate Boston Brand's grave, and see that there are many other empty graves just like it. But before they can decide on what to do next, a black ring places itself on the Spectre's finger. The Spectre itself is a force beyond life and death, but the Spectre's current host, Crispus Allen, is a dead man that the ring can claim as its own. And just like that, the Spectre has been neutralized and turned into an agent of the darkness. Elsewhere, a group of Atlanteans led by Aquaman's widow Mera and his former sidekick Tempest come ashore near the Amnesty Bay lighthouse. It's here that Arthur Curry, Aquaman, was buried next to his father. Tempest convinced Mera to allow the Atlanteans to move Arthur's remains to an undersea tomb, since that gesture could help repair the damaged relationship between Atlantis and the surface. Mera hates the idea since it goes against Arthur's wishes, but is willing to make that sacrifice for the greater good. But when they arrive, it's too late. The grave is empty, torn to shreds from the inside out. And all of those assembled are horrified to see Black Lantern Aquaman standing before them. He rips through the Atlantean guards like tissue paper, harvesting their fearful hearts with ease, but his real target is Mera. He taunts her with talk of affairs he's had with other women, and reminds her of the painful feelings she had for their dead son. But Mera isn't buying it. She isn't becoming an emotional mess. She's just getting angrier, and that makes her fight back harder. While Mera deals with Aquaman, Tempest is attacked by two more Black Lantern Atlanteans, Tula and Dolphin, both former girlfriends of his who died tragically. His magic is able to hold them back long enough for Mera to land what should have been a kill shot. And this moment is incredibly important for the rest of Blackest Night, because it makes us realize that the Black Lanterns are far more dangerous than we thought. Mera completely destroys Dolphin's head, and in any other piece of zombie fiction, that would have been it. One less undead creature to worry about. But Dolphin's body doesn't fall. It doesn't even pause. It just keeps fighting back against Mera as the head regenerates itself. These are not normal zombies, and the usual rules for how to deal with zombies do not apply. While Mera is desperately trying to figure out what to do against a seemingly unkillable enemy, Tempest makes a grave mistake. He tries to appeal to the goodness that he believes must still be buried somewhere within Tula. This belief that he could reach her, save her, bring her back to them, it's just what the Black Lantern was looking for. She harvests his heart, drains it of hope, and another black ring raises the body of Tempest as a new Black Lantern. Everyone but Mera has now fallen, and she's outnumbered 4-1, so she escapes into the night to plan her next move. At the same time, in Washington, D.C., black rings descend on the graves of Hank and Don Hall, the original Hawk and Dove, champions of chaos and order, respectively. Hawk rises as a Black Lantern just like all the others, but something strange happens when the rings approach Don's final resting place. The Black Lantern rings can't raise him. They can't even get close to his body, no matter how many times they try. Their scans report that Don Hall of Earth is at peace. And while it may not yet be clear why this is happening, it's a huge deal, because the rest of this issue has hammered home the idea that the Black Lanterns are unstoppable and unkillable, able to topple even the Spectre. But in this moment, we see the first sign that the Black Rings have limits, and it's now a race to learn what those limits are before it's too late. Back in Gotham, Hal and Barry are finally able to push past the shock of seeing the reanimated corpse of their friend, and begin fighting smarter. Hal lands on the rooftop of the Gotham City Police Department, and sends all his ring data on the night's events to Barbara Gordon's computer so she can alert the rest of the superhero community. Barry, meanwhile, leads Martian Manhunter into a chemical treatment plant where he mixes together large quantities of highly flammable materials. As soon as the trap is set, Hal arrives and throws Commissioner Gordon's police car at Jean, sending the entire building up in flames. Martian Manhunter was always weak to fire, so this was the best way to end the fight quickly and decisively. There's a really cool moment where we find out that Barry is speeding up his own thoughts to make it harder for Martian Manhunter to read or manipulate them, which is a great addition to detail, because otherwise it shouldn't have been possible for them to execute this plan when Martian Manhunter could just read their minds and know what they're up to. Unfortunately, it was all for nothing, because not only did the fire not hurt the Black Lantern Martian Manhunter, now he has backup. A whole Black Lantern Justice League emerges from the smoldering flames. Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Elongated Man, and Sue Dibney, and now Firestorm. It was all Hal and Barry could do to hold their own against one dead friend, and now they have to fight 6. Hal tries his best to fight off Hawkman and Hawkgirl, while Barry decides to try an experiment. He outmaneuvers Black Lantern Firestorm and then tries removing the black ring from his finger. At first it seems promising, since removing the ring causes Black Lantern Firestorm great pain, but it turns out that the ring is connected to the body by black roots that can't be broken, and any damage done to the body is quickly healed. They need more information in order to solve this, and they need backup if they're going to survive the night. Fortunately, Ray Palmer, the Atom, suddenly emerges from Hawkman's ring and punches him right in the face. Hawkman and Hawkgirl had gone after Ray, so he shrank down and hid inside Carter's black ring. Ray describes the inside of the ring as resembling a mix of bone and dark matter, containing microscopic wormholes that funnel emotional energy somewhere else. But for now, there's no more time for experimentation. Firestorm's alchemic abilities transform the air around our heroes into gunpowder, so that the act of Flash running causes everything to explode. In the chaos, Ralph and Sue begin to harvest Ray's heart filled with compassion, only for the power of compassion to save him as the Indigo Lanterns arrive on the scene. Indigo One and Monk of the Indigo tribe save the Atom and make quick work of Elongated Man and Sue Dibney. The Indigo Light of Compassion allows them to mimic the powers of other nearby lanterns, and by combining Indigo Light with Green Lantern's willpower, they manage to destroy Ralph and Sue's black rings, severing their connection to the darkness, obliterating both Black Lanterns forever. Before the rest of the Undead Justice League can attack, the Indigos teleport themselves, Hal, Barry, and Ray to the Hall of Justice to regroup. Mara is already in the hall, waiting for backup to arrive. The Black Lantern Atlanteans had kept hunting Mara, forcing her further inland to put her at a disadvantage, but she found that they had a harder time tracking her when she kept her emotions in check. She made her way to the Hall of Justice and used Aquaman's old security codes to activate the emergency signal, which attracted the attention of the current Firestorm, who at the moment is a fusion of Jason Rush and his girlfriend Jen. Green Lantern, Flash, Mara, Firestorm, and the Atom turn to the Indigo Lanterns for answers, as they lay out the foundation for this entire conflict. According to Indigo 1, the universe originally existed in a state of endless darkness, until one day there was light. For hundreds of years, the universe was filled with nothing but blinding white light, before the darkness eventually fought back and attempted to reassert itself. The light survived, but it was splintered apart into a spectrum of different lights, embodying different aspects of life. Every living being was born from the light, and produces emotional energy that feeds back into that spectrum. Since the white light of creation is the only force that has ever beaten back the darkness, the only hope now is to combine the lights of the emotional spectrum before the army of Black Lanterns grows too strong. But they're almost out of time, because every Lantern homeworld is being attacked by Black Lanterns even more aggressively than what's been happening on Earth. Indigo 1's explanation makes a very interesting distinction. She says that these worlds aren't being invaded by the darkness. We are the invaders. We're children of the light, and light invaded a universe of darkness and began taking it over. What she's saying is that darkness is the natural state of things, and life itself is something invasive that was never supposed to be here. That doesn't mean the Black Lanterns are suddenly the good guys, but it is a fascinating way to recontextualize this simple zombie story into something more akin to a story about nature retaking the world from humanity, only on a cosmic scale. Now that they've all had a moment to slow down and think, the Atom makes an important observation. Despite the fact that the Black Lanterns seem to possess all the memories of your dead loved ones, they never react to anything the way those people normally would. Coupled with the fact that their bodies will regenerate as long as the Black Ring survives, and destroying the Black Ring is the only way to kill a Black Lantern, the conclusion seems clear. Black Lanterns are not the people they pretend to be. The Black Rings download data from human remains and use that data to reconstruct a body and memories, for the sole purpose of targeting the emotional vulnerabilities of anyone with an attachment to that simulated person. Don't think of a Black Lantern as a zombie wearing a ring. Think of it as a ring piloting a dead body. Indigo 1 wants to take Hal Jordan off-world immediately. The reason she and Monk came to Earth in the first place is the fact that Hal has personal connections to the leaders of every Lantern Corps, so he should be able to help rally them to work together against the darkness. Barry objects, saying that they really need to formulate a plan before splitting up, but they get interrupted by the arrival of the remaining members of the Black Lantern Justice League. In the commotion, the Indigos grab Hal and teleport away, leaving Flash, Mara, Firestorm, and the Atom to fend for themselves. Tragedy strikes right away, as Black Lantern Firestorm forcibly separates Jason and Jen. When Jason tries to fight back, he gets absorbed into the Black Lantern Firestorm matrix, and is now helpless to do anything but watch as Firestorm turns Jen into a pile of salt, until nothing but her heart full of fear remains. And just when it seems like things couldn't get any worse, dozens of Black Rings come crashing through the walls of the Hall of Justice, heading straight for the supervillain morgue. In an instant, the Black Lanterns have gained an entire supervillain army. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. A lot has happened already, and the heroes of the DC Universe are just starting to realize what's going on. We're going to start seeing how the heroes of Earth go about confronting this crisis next time in part 2 of this series, which will take a look at Blackest Night Titans number 1-3 and Blackest Night Wonder Woman number 1. The Black Lanterns have managed to gain a lot of ground thanks to the element of surprise, but will that change once the superhero population starts fighting back? We're about to find out, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon, because it's the best way to make sure you're notified when each new video in this 7-part series is released. And while you're waiting for part 2 to come out, let me know in the comments section what you thought of these issues, and what your experience with Blackest Night was. Were you reading it as it was coming out, or did you come to it later? Did you read any of the tie-ins, or just stick to the main miniseries? Tell me all about it in the comments section of this video. I'm really curious to see what you have to say. In the meantime, let me just say thank you for taking the time to watch. My name is Dan. We'll talk again soon.